Your doctor has tried to explain to you what risk factors increase your risk of heart attack and stroke. But in many cases, I would say most cases, your doctor's wrong about what your leading risk of developing a heart attack or heart disease or stroke or other outcomes of metabolic disease are. Today, I have a very special guest. This will be his second appearance here. The first time he and I chatted 2 years ago, that video got over 260,000 views. And so I suspect there's going to be a lot of great information here that you need to watch until the very, very end so that you can truly understand what it is that increases your risk of a heart attack and what your doctor gets wrong. Here is Dr. Sean O'Mara. Welcome back, doctor. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, well, thank you, Dr. Berry. A pleasure to return to your channel and to your followers. Excited to be here today.
Absolutely. And this is going to be a very image-heavy presentation. Dr. O'Mara's got lots of images to share with you guys today, and I think that just helps you understand what we're talking about a little better. So I appreciate you putting this together, Doctor. Give us just a brief intro for people who are not familiar with your work and why they should be paying attention to this.
Yes. So what I do is I learned just through my own experience what you got to do to optimize your health. I studied it for 7 years. Volunteer, Dr. Berry. I didn't take a penny. Full-time, 7 years, because my life changed so much. I wanted to figure it out. And during that time, I received funding with my research partner from the National Science Foundation. This is a great organization. It's taxpayer funded. So they use their resources from the taxpayer to improve the lives of Americans. I'm super impressed with my interaction with them. It was a great study that we did, over 6,000 Americans, looking at what do you have to look inside the body, and it's not cholesterol, like you alluded to, what your doctor thinks, to actually reduce your risk of disease, eliminate chronic disease, and actually improve your health, your quality of life. So that's what I did for 7 years, and I'm happy to be back and talk to you about it.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm glad to have you back. So what we're talking about today is both visceral fat, which is the fat not on your belly, but inside your belly, but also intra-organ fat, which is super, super important, super dangerous. Fat inside your liver, fat inside your pancreas, fat inside and around your heart, even the fat that's inside of your muscle. All of these things are not just fat that shows up on the scale and laughs at you when you try to put your sexy jeans on. These fats are metabolically active. They are inflammatory, constantly putting out different cytokines that cause inflammation in your body, cause damage in your body. The buildup of this damage ultimately leads to a bad outcome, like a heart attack or a stroke. And so it's my opinion, doctor, that visceral adiposity and intrahepatic, intrapancreatic fat, fatty heart, fatty tongue, fatty muscle, fatty kidney, these are the leading indicators that you are metabolically very unhealthy and at very, very high risk of a heart attack, a stroke, or some other endpoint.
Exactly right, Dr. Berry. These are upstream indicators of disease. All other forms of chronic disease follow from these upstream indicators, and these upstream indicators are not taught to us in medical school. If we think back about our own experience, the curriculum in medical school is devoid of what is really the most important thing for physicians, and because of that, it's kept from patients to be aware of this. So first indicator I like to bring to your attention is the heart right here. So all this fat are surrounding this white stuff's constricting, engulfing, encompassing this vital organ. And hats off to the person who did the scan. This is Governor Kevin Stitt, the governor of Oklahoma. He is the first governor in our country to step forward and get scanned and look at this dangerous fat that's around his heart and dangerous fat inside his abdomen. So the governor gave us permission to show his scan. I'm super proud of the governor. He met Secretary Kennedy, and he was prompted to really get himself healthy and get Oklahoma healthy. Dr. Berry, this is what we got to do on a state level, community level. We got to get people on an individual level excited about health, and we need the leadership. We need more important leaders in our country, in our state governments that are going to model this. So I'm super excited to be able to share this image of first the governor.
Yeah, and so my first reaction to looking at that scan is I would hope that the lieutenant governor is in good health and ready to step up because that's quite a bit of cardiac fat. I also in Tennessee, I'm leading kind of a movement of make Tennessee healthy again. I'm going around speaking to different civic organizations, trying to point out how important metabolic health is to improve the health of our entire state. And therefore, once I'm doing it here, you're doing it in Oklahoma, we're going to eventually improve the health of our entire country. And then once again, as it used to be, America will be leading the rest of the world by good example,
Yes.
And they'll all want to be as healthy as us. And then you've just improved the health of the entire world.
I think we this deluded the world into thinking that cholesterol is what you should be following. Yep. And we poisoned and polluted the waters. And it's about time that America steps forward and shows the rest of the world this dangerous fat in which you should be tracking. So here's another scan. This time it's through the chest and abdomen of Governor Stitt. And all this white stuff right there, you don't have to go to medical school. That's a colon. And your audience can tell that that is the colon. And surrounding that colon is all this deadly, dangerous, inflammatory fat called visceral fat. That's the gallbladder and that's the liver. And above the liver, right between the lungs, again, is the governor's heart. And you can see that big chunk of white fat surrounding it. So the important thing to be aware of, Dr. Berry, is if you got a lot of visceral fat in your abdomen, you've got a lot of fat around your heart. These markers go together. Heart fat, muscle fat, and visceral fat, all three go proportionally together. The cool thing is, if you kill one, you eliminate one, the other two go away. So it's a really valuable biomarker to be focusing on. We want to educate our physicians about this. We want to educate patients in general, the whole country, to be aware of this. So super, super glad. Hats off to you for promoting health awareness in Tennessee to get Tennesseans healthy, Oklahomans healthy. We want Americans to get healthy across every state.
Absolutely. And before we continue, Doctor, let me show this. Let's see, how can I do this? Okay, this is in my way. Let me move this. Okay, so what everybody needs to understand is that your doctor, now why is it doing that? That's not how I want it to look. Can you see that? I think it's all there.
It looks like the whole chart's there. I just can't see the detail, but I'm in a little tiny screen.
Let me
hopefully
make
the
this,
followers can.
Let me try this. No, I don't know why it's looking like that. See, there's always something, right? It's always something. Oh, okay. I think I know why. Go this way. There we go.
That's
okay,
bigger.
That looks better. Okay, so when your doctor talks about LDL, oh, your LDL's high, that you're going to have a heart attack. That's a proxy marker. Okay, that's what that is. By no means, we know there are over half the people who have a heart attack have normal LDL. So it's not like a one-to-one relationship. Your LDL is high, therefore you are going to have a heart attack. That's a rough proxy marker. It's actually a bad proxy marker, but it was the proxy marker that your doctor was taught. That's the proxy marker to look for. And that's why that's all your doctor wants to talk about. They don't check any of these other things that Dr. Omar and I and others talk about. So when it comes to visceral fat, there's several ways to look at it. The BMI is one you've probably heard about, but it's notoriously inaccurate. If you're very tall, very short, if you're very muscular, it's inaccurate. It is not a good proxy marker for visceral fat. The next is if you just measure your waist circumference. That's a less bad proxy marker for visceral fat. But if you've got a lot of subcutaneous fat around your belly, that's going to show up when you measure your waist, right? So
Correct.
It's a little less bad proxy marker than BMI, but it's still not great. Now, if you measure your waist to height ratio, that's better. That's still, you're going to get that subcutaneous fat around the belly in that measurement, but that's been shown in studies that that's a much less bad proxy marker. And then the next one you would go to is a DEXA scan. And that's a fairly decent proxy marker, but it can still be fooled by some things. And there's a little bit of radiation involved, not much, but a little bit. And in my opinion, and I think Dr. Omar would agree with this, is that the CAT scan and MRI, they're not even really proxy markers. They are literal images of the fat in situ. And you get a lot of radiation with a CAT scan. So I think Dr. Omar, the reason he focuses on MRI is because the image is so beautiful, so clear, so pristine, and there's no radiation involved. And so that's what we're going to be looking at today, I think predominantly is magnetic resonance images, because there's no radiation, and it is the closest approximation to the actual amount of intra-organ fat and visceral fat on that human body. Do you agree with that, Doctor?
I do completely. In fact, that was probably one of the best synopsis and summaries of the various ways that you could analyze what's going on inside the body, from the lowest to the very best. And you did a great job, kind of amplify that a little bit. Look at these photographs, Dr. Berry, of actual hearts. These are postmortem, so they're autopsies. 28-year-old killed in a motor vehicle accident. Sad for them, but we can see this fat beginning to form on their left anterior descending, the widowmaker, fat forming around the right coronary artery. And this person is 38, died from a heart attack. Elevated, see that big chunk of fat forming around that left anterior descending, the right coronary artery. About half the heart is covered in fat, half is free at the age of 38. But now you see a 58-year-old who died from a heart attack, and their complete heart is encased in this deadly inflammatory fat, a form of visceral fat called epicardial adipose tissue that surrounds that heart. And the scary thing is, Dr. Berry, I've worked with thousands of people. Every single person that's come to me that's worked one-on-one that we've scanned who's aged 50 and above, every single one of them has a heart like this, because they haven't been living correctly. They've been eating processed foods. They're stressed out. They're drinking. They're not getting sleep. They're eating too many carbohydrates. They don't know anything about carnivore or fermented foods. And this causes this adiposity to develop unknown to them. So you can't go and open up your chest, for surgical evaluation to see whether you got this deadly fat. You could start with a DEXA scan. Even better is an MRI, as Dr. Berry points out. It is a very accurate, it is the gold standard for evaluating, directly measuring and quantifying and imaging the amount of this deadly disease that you have form around your heart. So if everybody else has had this, why, if you're listening today and you're age 50 or above, why would you be any exception? So get an MRI scan, or a CT scan does use radiation. And if you've ever had a CAT scan or abdominal CT scan, you can demand to get those images and look at it yourself. It will not have been read by a doctor, because no doctors read this except for Dr. Rosa, a radiologist in the VA, Dr. Andrew Mitchell, a professor of radiology at Vanderbilt University. Otherwise, doctors are not aware of this to even read about it. Dr. Berry, I'm sure, looks at it when any images he sees, but we need to make this more mainstream and not make it just a handful of doctors.
And this needs to be standard of care around the country. And when you guys look at that bottom image of that heart that's it's smothered in fat. First of all, many of us think like plumbers, and you would think, well, gosh, that's got to be smothering the heart muscle and kind of constricting it. And yes, there is a physical component where this makes the heart work harder. But here's what you have to understand. That fat around that heart at the bottom, that is a metabolically active tissue. It's not just sitting there. It is secreting, it is mucking around with the hormones, it's secreting inflammatory cytokines. And in the case of fatty heart like that, these cytokines go directly into the coronary circulation, directly to the cardiac myocytes.
That's exactly right. So you can think of it as just a toxin, poisoning those beautiful, pristine coronary arteries that we're all born with. You come into the world with none of that fat, and then this develops through poor living. Nobody's eating a proper human diet. Nobody's paying attention to their lifestyle the way they should be. And so this is accumulating inside of you. But you want to be aware of this. You want to see it. You have time to turn yourself around. And it also is important to point out, Dr. Berry, that this inflammatory fat also exposes the electrical conduction system going on in the heart, and it's contributing to the massive increase in incidence of AFib that we're seeing, and cardiac dysrhythmias, SVTs, that nobody's really talking about. And they try to correct it with drugs. They try to correct it with aberrant pathways through cardioversion and electrocautery. These are dangerous procedures that are not without risk. And so you'd be much better off eliminating this inflammatory fat that's lining your heart. I've had multiple patients come to me with AFib, and it absolutely goes away if you simply get rid of this inflammatory fat that's encasing your heart.
Yeah, we've seen hundreds and hundreds of cases where people adopted either a meat-heavy keto diet or ketovore or carnivore diet, and they came to us with AFib, a routine on 1, 2, 3 medications. In many cases, they'd been cardioverted several times. They'd had an ablation or two, and the AFib persisted, and it was almost assuredly because of this cardiac fat that's surrounding the heart muscle. And once they adopted that very, very low carbohydrate, essentially sugar-free diet, full of healthy animal protein and healthy animal fats, they were able to get rid of this fat around their heart, and almost magically, the AFib got better, or in many cases went completely away. But you and I both know this is not magic. This is physiology and biochemistry.
Yeah. So if you're listening today and you got a history of AFib, you got a history of heart disease, you've ever had a heart attack, you need to get this scan and get this eliminated. This is such an imperative for you to be aware of. Your doctor won't know about it. You're just going to have to take the lead. And this isn't like it's fringe science. There are over 25,000 published studies on the dangers of visceral fat and heart fat. You can jump into PubMed. You can jump into AI. Ask it about heart fat, epicardial adipose tissue, its association to AFib, heart disease, heart attacks, and you'll see the published studies. They are kept from your doctor because they're not part of the American Heart Association, the American College of Cardiology, or the American Diabetes Association. These professional organizations are keeping out what would really eliminate disease and educate patients on an individual level about what they should be working on, instead of this spurious pursuit of chasing numbers of natural cholesterol that your body makes and needs to optimize your health. Follow something that's got pure signal instead of all the noise associated with cholesterol, and get rid of what is structural disease, now completely ignored, undiagnosed inside your body, only because you've never got this image.
Yep, I totally agree. And it reminds me so much of the power of checking a fasting insulin on people. Super valuable. Immediately tells you this person's eating too many carbohydrates, this person's eating or drinking too much sugar, but yet no doctor's ever heard of it. No doctor knows to check it. They don't know what to do with the results. But if you go and just look in the literature for hyperinsulinemia, sometimes it's referenced as insulin resistance, but that's effectively it's hyperinsulinemia. There's hundreds of studies showing that it's intimately correlated, very tightly correlated with heart disease, stroke, heart attack, all the other things, just like visceral adiposity. But you never hear about fasting insulin. Nobody ever talks about it except if you're in this group of people, right? The same goes for
yesterday. I was talking to my doctor. I got a brand new doctor. I'm retired now, U.S. Army colonel, so I get a new position from my retirement. And I had to ask and educate my new primary care physician about a fasting insulin. It's
Yep.
ironic he didn't know anything about it, but that's
But
this,
to me,
physicians just don't know about it.
yeah, to me, the visceral adiposity and the intra-organ fat that we're talking about today, it's exactly the same, because there's hundreds of articles in the literature about it. And it's always shown to be tightly correlated with bad outcomes. But yet, it's just not something that the American Heart Association chose to talk about. They chose to talk about total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, ApoB, LP little a. That's what they want to talk about. So they suck all the oxygen out of the room when it comes to actually important tests, like a fasting insulin, like an HSCRP, and like these imaging studies looking for too much visceral adipose tissue.
No, it's completely the case, and you talk about muscle fat and intra-organ fat. It does correspond to that visceral fat. These are legs of this patient here with a huge amount of this inflammatory fat in their abdomen, Dr. Berry. And then their legs look like Wagyu beef, just all of these white streaks, which is just human muscle becoming marbleized, like a marbleized steak. And then this individual here is an Olympic sprinter with just the smallest amount of visceral fat I've ever seen on an MRI scan. Big, beautiful, dark muscles compared to this person's small muscles with fat streaks. And their legs are so much healthier, don't have a Wagyu beef appearance. And it really does, turn into an appearance of like marbleized steak versus this happy, healthy cow that's out in the field eating grass. And this cow has been fed carbohydrates. And today, I don't know if you've seen the news story that they're feeding cattle candy. They're feeding human candy to cows to increase the amount of carbohydrates, to increase the amount of weight. And this amounts to just disease inside these animals. So I literally scan people and I see this disease in their legs and their human tissue, and trying to tell them, stop the carbohydrates, stop the sugars.
And it's actually been common for a decade or two in feeding animals in feedlots, is they'll take expired Skittles, expired candy bars, and they'll grind those up into the cattle ration, and it increases the sugar content, and that's going to make the animal gain fat faster. But go back to the steak picture, Dr. O'Mara. Look at the steak on the left. See that fat cap on the outside? That's natural. That's normal. That's supposed to be there. That's actually beneficial fat. It's analogous to subcutaneous fat. The fat we're talking about today, point to that marbling in the middle of the muscle belly. See that? That marbling that tastes so delicious on your plate is very unhealthy for the cow themselves. Now, I haven't bought the argument that if you eat that marble steak, that's unhealthy for you, maybe, but definitely unhealthy for the cow. And we know that cows in feedlots that are fed these Skittles and ground up candy bars are much less healthy. They have to take antibiotics much more commonly. They have to take acid blockers. They have to take all these medications because they're fed an unhealthy diet. It's not a cow-specific diet. So it's the fat inside of that muscle. That's the dangerous fat.
Yeah, and if it's unhealthy for cows, I think we physicians need to be aware of it. Veterinarians even aren't aware. I have about 3 client patients that are veterinarians. They know that grain-fed, carbohydrate-fed cows are the ones that get sick and they make all their money. They said, Sean, I never made any money. I never got called on any, but a cow is fed grass-fed diet. Imagine, Dr. Berry, we wouldn't make any money off patients if they ate a species-appropriate diet, just like our veterinary counterparts share that this is where they make money. This is where they never got called. This is what we need to be bringing to the attention of make people aware. And you're the first physician, Dr. Berry, that has ever correctly pointed out that this is healthy fat and this is unhealthy fat going on inside that animal. People aren't aware of it. And I like to educate my client patients when they come to me to teach them how to hunt. Our ancestors could hunt the healthiest animals. They knew how to pick it out of the herd. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're following Dr. Berry and you just heard his wisdom, you can be a modern day hunter in your meat counter. Go up to that butcher counter, go up to, if you're buying meat, wherever you're buying, and buy the steak, even if it's grain fed. For God's sakes, get the one that looks more like this and less like this, because there are other factors: stress, too much heat, too much traveling around, that causes this kind of marbleization and disease inside of cows. So be selective. Your body is your most important physical asset. Do not poison it by bringing suboptimal food into it. Take an educated response and track this. Getting an MRI, you're not going to get feedback on eating healthy, tracking your cholesterol. You're going to get feedback on eating healthy or improperly by tracking MRI scans where you see this going on in your legs. And by the way, ask yourself, if I have legs like this, how am I going to walk when I'm in my 80s? You're not going to. You're going to need a walker, or you're going to need a wheelchair. And the other thing they didn't teach us in medical school is eventually patients can't even go in a wheelchair anymore because they can't even hold their body up anymore. They just fall over in the chair. And then, Miss Jones, you're in a bed until you die. So track this dangerous fat going in your body.
A lot of doctors, we want to impress on our patients. This is very important. Please listen to me. And the end point that doctors usually stress is you could have a heart attack and die. But I want to be very clear here. And this makes some people uncomfortable when I say this, but I want to be very clear. I've seen this hundreds of times, and I know you have as well. There are outcomes that are worse than death. Okay. And when you've got thighs, so up in the top right, that's the cross section of that patient's thighs. And obviously they have a lot of subcutaneous fat, but look inside the muscles. It looks like that cut of beef. It's marbled. Not only is that weakening their legs, they don't have nearly enough muscle tone, but it's also poisoning their muscles, making the muscles atrophy sooner. I promise you, being in a nursing home after your second heart attack, and now you have heart failure, and now your legs are so atrophied and marbled like that you can't even walk anymore, that is a fate that's much, much worse than death. I've had nursing home patients over the years beg me, please do something, put me out of my misery. And of course, that's not something we can discuss in the United States. And so we couldn't have that discussion. But I promise you, there are things worse than death. You do not want to go down the road of the person in the top right-hand corner.
I 100% agree, Dr. Berry. I want everybody who's listening to us today to think about you when you're 90 years old and you encounter something as simple that you would never think about, a curb. Well, that curb, when you're 90 years old, could literally kill you. And you're shaken and you're terrified that you're going to fall. I remember walking Secretary Kissinger once when I was in active duty. He was so terrified he was going to fall on the stage. And I saw fear in that man's eyes. You don't have to be afraid about falling if you don't let this happen. You don't have that kind of disease. You can be vigorous and vital in your 90s and 100 if you take care of that body and watch for signs that's falling apart. Stop paying attention to cholesterol. Pay attention to the accumulation of disease, undiagnosed, unidentified inside your body that is ignored by conventional healthcare, that you want to find out. You dip in your own money, you pay for an MRI scan. Insurance companies are not going to pay for this, but you can get your own scan and see what's going on inside of your legs, inside of your abdomen, and around your heart.
Yes, I love it. What's the next slide we've got to look at, Doctor?
Yeah, so this is an important slide here that shows the difference between in just 2 months where all this visceral fat is present and how it dramatically was reduced and the patient grew muscle. All they did was they stopped jogging and started sprinting. So if you're listening today and you're trying to figure out what you can do to help get rid of visceral fat, it's intense exercise in brief periods of time. Lifting weights, resistance training, rather than doing long distance cycling or bicycling, which we also see increasingly associated with AFib. So cyclists, rowers, joggers are getting, atrial fibrillation. So visceral fat helps to be eliminated if you can do sprinting, maximum intensity exercise. So I like to point that out. And then check out these two scans. Very
Now,
interesting.
Dr. O'Mara, orient us. Tell us exactly what we're looking at. What part of the body? Because a lot of people are not used to looking at imaging studies. So tell us, what is that top image? What is the bottom image? And then point out the differences between the two.
Okay, so these two images, you can see this is a belly button. They're laying on their back, so they're laying down on a scanner when they're going through an MRI. These are the muscles on the side, and all the white stuff is visceral fat inside of that person. These are their love handles in their back. Same image, a different person now, filled with visceral fat, also laying on their back. But look at their faces. Watch when I show these faces of these two different guys. They're kids. So I like to educate people about the reality that this visceral fat starts really early in childhood. And the parents of these two boys, their brothers, 8 years old and 10 years old, give me permission to go out on the internet, want Americans warned about what's going on in these kids. But look, Dr. Berry, how much these boys' faces improved in 6 months getting rid of visceral fat. So here they are on the left. This boy goes to this. He looks like an average boy. Now these boys look like they're childhood actors. And look at Dr. Berry, their thin lips and they're pale. And now at a metabolic level, they're saturating their molecules of hemoglobin way better. And so they have much deeper redness to their oxygen saturation, and their lips are better perfused. So their lips look way healthier. Their eyes, their face, their skin is significantly improved. By golly, if kids can do this, getting rid of visceral fat, why aren't adults learning about this to do the same thing? This is how we get America healthy, pointing out what you got to do to eliminate disease instead of the subterfuge going on right now that conventional healthcare is pushing with cholesterol. Get rid of this deadly fat inside your body.
Because if you recommend, and first of all, let me say thank you so much to the parents of these two good-looking boys who said, yes, please share this with the world and help educate people. Thank you for doing that, number one. Number two, if every doctor in the country started recommending, hey, eat mostly meat or all meat, start lifting heavy things, and start running fast, there would be doctors filing bankruptcy left and right. There would be at least 7 multinational billion-dollar pharmaceutical companies declare bankruptcy within the first year or two. There would be at least 5 or 6 of the billion-dollar big food corporations declare bankruptcy. It would literally disrupt the economy. Okay,
that is the word, Dr. Berry. Yeah. It would disrupt the largest part of our economy is healthcare, of which 90% is treating chronic disease. So you're exactly right. So if it's going to be that disruptive, that's why, ladies and gentlemen, you are seeing so much opposition to the administration going on right now that's trying to take on, conventional healthcare and change things. They're disrupting the relationships that have been entrenched within the FDA, within the CDC, within the NIH. They're kicking out the feather merchants in there that have, represented, these influences of conventional profiteering from disease, and, now trying to promote awareness of health, make America healthy. This is an infant's heart. Look at this, Dr. Berry. It does not have that big chunk of fat on it. This is how you come into the world, and this is how you want to leave the world. You want to have a super healthy heart without this deadly fat. Get this, you tell your congressmen, your senators, you want visceral fat and heart fat taught in medical schools, promoted to the Secretary of Health, Secretary Kennedy. We need to help them bring awareness of what really is going to optimize. Listen, I've been a health optimizing physician for 15 years. The most important people in the world come to me. I could follow anything, to optimize people, but I follow science, what really works. And what really works is nothing in my 30 years of medicine improves the human being more than getting rid of this deadly fat around the heart, deadly fat inside the abdomen, and fat filling people's muscles. And you just significantly improve people's appearance and performance, and you make them better living human beings. And that's what we need. We need to get everybody living better so that we can cut down on the wastefulness of treating chronic disease. People would increase their productivity in the workplace. There would be less people calling in sick. American productivity would explode across the globe, and we should share this example to the rest of the world.
And we're going to give you guys step-by-step instructions about how to get rid of this visceral fat later in this video. So I've seen a couple of questions in the comments. This is actually being presented live in front of our private community. And I see the comments and questions going by. We're gonna lay it out for you very simply. Even if you're starting like the governor in that very first scan, whose heart is smothered by a layer of fat, whose liver is full of fat, whose belly's full of fat, we're going to walk you through how to reverse that before this video is over. So stick with us. Oh, this is a very interesting image. Tell us about this,
so
Dr.
This is a big problem. Dr. Berry, we're not talking about this. You think chronic disease is bad today? If you're listening to Dr. Berry and you're part of this community, you think we got a lot of disease today? You ain't seen nothing. Wait till this tsunami of all this visceral fat with these dad bods that everybody's walking around with, just totally complacent about. These dad bods are just in this anterior displacement forward like this of visceral adiposity behind that is going to come with a huge cost in the form of chronic disease. And 3 months later, this person looks like this because this is what happened. They had all this visceral fat, all this fat around their heart. You can see at the same time we scan their abdomen, we scan their heart. And 3 months later, look at the tremendous reduction in that visceral fat and that heart fat around the heart. So it's easy to achieve. Let me ask you a question. If you're following right now, do you think you would improve that much taking a statin or reversing your cholesterol in 3 months? Who do you know that's ever improved their cholesterol and said, my whole life changed and I got awesome when I got my cholesterol under control? But you get rid of this deadly inflammatory fat that Dr. Berry pointed out so well in the beginning that causes all these inflammatory molecules to get released throughout your whole body, causing chronic disease. Then you completely change your life. You got to find out about this in a very short period of time, living correctly, making the correct choices, how to improve your health. You can do that. And here's a guy, dad bod, 34, and now 6 years later, his dad bod is much worse. This is my friend. He's only 40 years old. 2 months ago, he called me up. I'm lightheaded, feel like I'm going to pass out. Look at my Apple Watch. AFib, new onset AFib, sent him to the ER. Got admitted, got taken care of. And what did he have going on? You're right, big chunk of fat around the 40-year-old's heart, completely covered. His fat around his heart is completely covered with that deadly fat, 40 years old, getting AFib. Now, Ken, I did not see 40-year-olds. I'm sorry, not 40, he's 38. He's 38. I keep thinking he's 40. 38-year-olds coming into the ER with new onset AFib. That wasn't the case. But with these dad bods, we are seeing the progression of this disease, and we got a tsunami facing us, and we're wasting so much money. What could we better do with all that money? We're now just flushing down the toilet, managing chronic disease, if we could apply it and use it some other more constructive way. So this is really valuable. I hope this is one of your most popular shows ever. Dr. Barry?
I think it should be if it's not. But let me just you spoke about the tsunami that's coming. Let me just go into that a little bit. I want people to really understand this. When I was in kindergarten, there was one obese child in the entire school. Okay, 5 or 6 kindergarten classes, there was one child that would have qualified as severely obese. So yeah, we had obesity back then. We had overweight back then. We had all these things back then, but we had them in much, much lower percentages. And so when those people grew up, they kept getting fatter and fatter. And now we have people my age, 50s, like Dr. O'Mara, 60s, 70s, and they have heart attacks, strokes, and all the other stuff. But the tsunami that I see coming that Dr. O'Mara is talking about is if you go to the average kindergarten class today, a third of the class is severely obese. Half of the class is overweight, if not obese. We're talking about 5 and 6-year-old children that already have fatty heart, fatty liver, and severe obesity. So that fat, remember we said earlier, it's not just laying there. It's not inert. It is producing inflammatory cytokines. It is causing disease in the body. So you've got a 5-year-old child that's going to have fatty heart their entire life. They're going to have AFib in their 20s or 30s. They're going to have their first heart attack in their 30s or 40s. They're going to have their first toe amputated from type 2 diabetes in their 40s or 50s. We are about to if we don't reach out, each one of us individually, including you, start reaching out to the people we love and the people we know and the people maybe that we don't even like and saying, hey, you're fat, you've got fatty heart, you've got fatty liver, you're literally going to make my taxes go up because I'm going to have to be paying for your Medicaid when you're on disability because you've had 3 heart attacks and now you have heart failure, you've got a leg cut off, you're blind and you're on dialysis, and it's the food that you're eating and the lifestyle that you're living. That's the tsunami that's coming. Is this generation, the teens, the 20s, the 30s are so unhealthy. It was not like that.
Very
it was
well
not
said,
like that when I was a teenager. When I was a teenager, there was 2 or 3 overweight kids in the entire class. Now, the average teenager is overweight, and they already have the beginnings of fatty heart and fatty liver. And this, if we don't change the way society functions, this will end very, very badly.
Very badly, I agree. And, that complacency is in all walks of life. It's not just among average people. We didn't used to see it in law enforcement. Today we see in law enforcement. Just 2 weeks ago, the governor of Oklahoma got me and the commissioner of the state police, public health safety commissioner, got me to go in and lecture to all the state troopers in Oklahoma. That state is leading the way, trying to bring awareness of this deadly fat and address the issue of chronic obesity going on in law enforcement. Just this morning, the Secretary of War, Secretary Pete Hegseth, got in front of those general officers, brought them all in the audience, and said, the era of being fat is over. You're going to have to pass your standards. We're not going to wink anymore. We're going to be a legit Department of War, and we're going to have our military fit. And so it's not just average people, it's this disease process and entrenched even in realms where you should be healthy, people became complacent. So I sense a change in the air. I sense a new sheriff is in town. I sense there's a new attitude about health. You got Secretary Kennedy fighting to make America healthy. He's boldly taking on, very much like his father and his uncle, taking on traditional forces, setting aside politics. I'm speaking to health. I don't know about politics. I'm a physician, but I like that we got leadership that know that health is important. It can't be just Dr. Barry and myself and a few other physicians. Everybody listening has to do this and promote health awareness and real optimizing health if we're going to recover our country.
Yeah, and you touched this tangentially, but I agree. If we continue to let this epidemic of metabolic disease continue to grow, this will become a national security threat. And I don't think that's arguable any longer, not just because, all the soldiers are fat and they can't run over the hill, but you can't sit at a monitor and monitor computers if you've got brain fog because your blood sugar's high and your insulin's high. You have chronic fatigue, you don't feel good, you have wounds that won't heal. I could just go on and on and on about all of the outcomes of being metabolically unhealthy. That's good. That'll destroy a country, and it'll make an army unfit to protect that country. This is really bad, and I'm so glad that it's finally being talked about. I just hope it's not too late.
No, I am very grateful that it is being talked about. It's now in the forefront of discussions at the highest level, at the President Trump's cabinet levels, and the Secretary of Health, Human Services, Secretary Kennedy, Secretary Hegseth. These undaunted, determined, and motivated leaders. Governor Stitt would be included among them. That are trying to bring awareness of this and pointing out the importance of health. It's just critical. We really have to do it. I'm an optimist. The good news that I can share with everybody listening today is that in a very short period of time, in a matter of months, we see the eradication of this fat around the heart. We see eradication of fat within the abdomen. A little bit longer, a little bit slower is the elimination of this fat within the legs. But once you get rid of it, people start walking better. They stand better. They jog. They sprint. They do lift weights. They just have a whole better performance aptitude just by getting rid of this inflammatory fat that they previously didn't know anything about. So the awareness needs to be increased. There's definite reasons to be optimistic. And I just hope that this grows well beyond just your channel, and it goes to many other healthcare providers and physicians and social media influencers. Hats off to social media, Dr. Berry. Where would we be without having an alternative voice to be bringing this awareness to? Otherwise, who would ever find out about it? What you have done over the years, Dr. Berry, is just so commendable. So you're like a hero, being able to introduce this information to get to people to become aware what they got to do to become actually healthy.
Yep, and I've just been awarded a major award for my hard work and diligence in bringing this to social media. I've just been named number 3 on the top 20 most wanted misinfluencers in the world by the World Health Organization.
I was envious of you. Little tiny non-influential Sean O'Meara didn't make that list, but hail to you being such an effective misinfluencer, Dr. Berry. Very impressive.
But I think they really should call us mal-influencers, because they're not trying to imply that what Dr. O'Meara and I am saying is wrong. They're just saying that this is malinformation. This doesn't help push forward the narrative that we're trying to push forward. Therefore, you shouldn't listen to these guys. I mean, maybe it works, maybe it reverses your metabolic disease, but that's irrelevant, because we're trying to push a narrative here of plant-based and, climate change. That's the narrative. And you guys aren't helping the narrative at all. Therefore, you're a misinfluencer. And I tweeted, I'm not here to make $1 million or to make the World Health Organization my best friend. I'm here to improve the health of 1 million people. And that's what I'm busy doing. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. And I know that's your goal and motivation as well.
Yeah, it is indeed. It's so important. Those 6,000 Americans, I frequently think back that we studied for the National Science Foundation. We tracked all their chronic disease, and there wasn't a single exception. All of them improved their chronic disease by getting rid of their visceral fat, or at least starting to eliminate it to the degree that they eliminated it. So I've yet to see a single form of chronic disease that's not improved just by getting rid of it. And another association is the aorta right here, largest artery in the body. This inflammatory fat gets around that aorta, and by direct extension weakens the wall of that aorta, Dr. Berry. Then we see dissections, aortic dissections. We see aneurysms, aortic abdominal aneurysms, and then ruptures, because that that artery just continues to be weakened. All these different forms of chronic disease. So I very frequently point out this inflammatory fat around people that have aneurysms. And if you're listening today and you've been diagnosed with an aortic aneurysm, you better go get a scan and see that fat around it, because guess who's not going to tell you? Your doctor. They won't tell you about that fat. They'll just tell you, oh, in about 5 to 10 years, once it's even bigger, we'll do surgery on it. They'll never, because they don't know that that inflammatory fat is accumulating around it, causing that danger. So it's
That's the
all
key.
over your body.
Yes, and I want to point this out for people who may not know the difference. It's not that your doctor's evil or even ignorant. It's the way your doctor was trained. They see the fat that
100%.
Dr. Omar and I see, but they don't know the significance of it. And also, the fat is almost ubiquitous. Every scan you look at has got this, because everybody's metabolically unfit. But the doctors have not been trained to know the significance, the importance, the red flag waving of that visceral fat. They just don't realize how dangerous it is. And that's why they very many times, I remember I made a video about fatty pancreas several years ago. And there's a lot of literature about it, but then I actually talked to a radiologist and he said, well, fatty pancreas, that's ubiquitous. Every scan I see has fatty pancreas. And I said, so you don't comment on that on the report that would go back to the primary care doctor? And he said, almost never, unless it's like an ungodly amount, because everybody has it. So they just don't even say in the MRI report or the CAT scan report, this patient has fatty streaking in the liver, fatty streaking in the pancreas, they have fatty heart, they have fatty kidney. If you get a CT or an MRI of your head and neck, they don't comment that you've got fatty tongue. Yes, that's one of the leading causes of sleep apnea is fatty tongue. No, have you ever heard of that if you have sleep apnea? I bet you haven't. And it's because fatty tongue is so ubiquitous today that doctors see it in every scan every day. They don't realize that's the underlying problem.
The first doctor that I actually was able to educate about visceral fat and start reporting it, Dr. Berry, was Dr. Anna Rosa. She was chief of radiology at the VA that I was working at in St. Cloud, Minnesota. I went down to her. I said, you got to start reporting visceral fat. And what persuaded her was, in the VA, when you read a scan, it gives you the veterans' diagnoses, all the conditions they have. And I just begged her. I said, will you just do one thing? Will you just see that everybody that's got visceral fat has all these medical diagnoses in their veteran record? And the ones that have no visceral fat will have no medical problems. They'll be free of disease. Will you just pay attention to that? And my guess is if you see that, you'll start reading it. That was 3 years ago. She now reads visceral fat every single scan. She reads muscle fat in every single scan. She reads heart fat in every single scan, because she now sees the direct correlation. She pays attention to it. Do you know she's become more popular than me on social media? I taught her about this, 3 years ago, but she's such a kind person, and she's super popular, and she's more effective than I am on social media and bringing out awareness to this.
Yep. Now, I want you to look at this comment. This is from one of our private community members. The radiologist noted my fatty liver, but said it was totally normal. Nothing to do about it. Nothing to do about it. Wasn't even something that her primary care doc mentioned. She saw it herself from watching videos like mine and yours. And she's like, and she asked the radiologist, and he said, yeah, you've got fatty liver, but there's nothing you can do about that. And so then I think, so look at this. My doc's response was, I don't test for that because there isn't something I can prescribe for that.
Gosh,
it's back to the pharmaceutical answer. If there's not a pharmaceutical answer, then we're not even going to look for it. We're not going to comment on it. We're not going to talk about it because there's not a pill, injection, or infusion for that. So why would I even talk about it?
That's
unbelievable if you think about it.
Such a powerful statement. And so maybe this would be a good time these are the 7 things I recommend people do to help get rid of visceral fat and get rid of this heart fat around their heart and fat within their muscles. Cut out processed foods, eliminate carbohydrates, eat a meat-based diet, seafood. I recommend fermented foods to increase your microbiome. Do weekly extended fasting. Fasting really helps to eliminate this fat around your heart, fat in your abdomen, fat within your muscles, and then embrace stress hormesis. So things like a sauna, a cold plunge, sunshine, sprinting, those are all forms of stress hormetics. Optimizing your microbiome, fall in love with your microbiome, read about the microbiome. It's a great way you can improve your health and leverage it. And then, join a tribe, join a community. You're in Dr. Berry's community. Look what happens when you stay involved in his group. The other members and what he's doing inspire you. If you're listening today and you're not in his group, join his group or join another group of an effective physician that is really out there espousing what you should do to optimize health. That's really key. So I have found that when I bring people into my groups, that they just dramatically improve. I used to just take care of one-on-one. Now I do group settings, and I call it a tribe. I have an Alpha Maker program. I put people in it. I do programs like you do, and it changes the lives. It keeps people centered, weekly fed on what they got to do, cutting edge science, and we're changing the lives one life at a time.
I love your list. I want to point out, because for many people, Dr. Sean O'Mara is the sprinting guy, right? But I want you to look again very carefully. He's got these numbered, and I would guess, and you should probably assume, that he has these numbered in order of importance. Am I right about that, Dr. O'Mara?
That is correct.
You shouldn't start with number 4, sprinting. You should start with number 1, get rid of the processed food, get rid of the sugar, get rid of the carbs, fix your diet, beef, butter, bacon, eggs, or some variation of that. That's number 1, because that's going to give you 80% of the benefit, number 1. But number 2, you're not going to feel like sprinting if your MRI scan currently looks like the ones he was showing you previously, and you're much more likely to injure yourself. You do not start my program or Dr. O'Mara's program with sprinting. That's number 4 on the list. Number 1, 2, and 3 is fix your food, fix your food, fix your food, then fix your life and lifestyle. Then we'll talk about some sprinting. Am I speaking out of turn?
100%. In fact, this scan shows what happens to a human being that never exercised for 1 minute. The only thing they did was cut out processed foods, Dr. Berry, all that visceral fat, and in 2 weeks, your people are watching today can see they improved in 2 weeks. And you, whoever's watching, is not a doctor, you're not a radiologist, but you can see he reduces visceral fat, and the fat within his muscles are significantly better in 2 weeks. No exercise. The only thing they did was cut out processed foods. And then look how much they lost their visceral fat and all their muscle fat after 35 weeks. So this is my favorite slide. It shows you what happens even when you don't exercise. If you stop eating processed foods, especially processed carbohydrates, and just eat clean.
These are MRIs taken 2 weeks apart. Is that correct? And this is the same person in each image.
And then then it goes 5 weeks, 15 week 25, week 35. So it shows the evolution inside a human being, one person. Dr. Bear, we need to repeat this study for 100 Americans. It should be done so we can show people how bad these processed foods are, how they're destroying people, filling in with this deadly fat in their muscle, deadly fat in their abdomen, deadly fat around their heart.
Totally agree. The visceral fat is the dangerous fat. The fat that's on the outside of your thighs and the outside of your butt and the outside of your belly, you may not like that fat. It may not look good in the mirror, but that's not the fat that's going to kill you. The fat that's going to not only kill you, but make you miserable for years and years, lead to early disability, early AFib, early heart failure. The list goes on, is the visceral fat. If you have fatty heart, fatty liver, fatty tongue, fatty kidney, fatty pancreas, that's what's going to make you disabled quicker. That's what's going to make your body fail quicker. What's this image?
So this is an image, two different people. This person has most of their fat inside. So I call them thin outside, diseased inside, a toady. Thin outside, diseased inside. This person has most of their fat outside with less fat inside. But here's a very interesting thing about the subcutaneous fat. You know, Dr. Berry, they didn't teach us this in medical school, but to see this black line going between the subcutaneous fat separates the subcutaneous fat into two compartments. This acts like visceral fat. It's deadly, inflammatory. This fat, just like you said, on the outside, it's the superficial subcutaneous fat, is rich in a molecule called adiponectin, adiponectin. Everybody should write that down, research it. It comes from superficial subcutaneous fat, and it's the highest concentration is there. So if people, there's really great fat. This fat here is really great and really deadly fat, the stuff on the, the inside. So some fat is way worse than you understand, and some fat is way more beneficial than you understand. And big pharma, the healthcare system, don't want you to know the difference. But you can see this on these MRI scans. And the other interesting thing is this scarpus fascia. As you get rid of deep subcutaneous fat and visceral fat, this gets bigger and brighter. I've been doing this 13 years, kid. I did not notice that until I started to pay attention that people, as you get rid of this visceral fat, the fascia gets better. Now, here's what's really interesting about this fascia, cutting edge science. It connects your muscles with your fat, with your capillaries, veins, arteries, bones, and organs. It's the fiber optic network of our bodies. And so as you get rid of this inflammatory fat, it improves the state of your connectivity. And that's why when people get rid of visceral fat, they walk better, they sprint better, they stand better, they just look better, because that improves that fiber optic connectivity, gets rid of all those inflammatory molecules. Nothing you can do is going to improve you as much as getting rid of this inflammatory fat, these areas of fat inside your body.
Yep, I totally agree. Now, if somebody is convinced and they want to get an MRI, what should they ask their doctor to order? Or they can bypass their doctor and just find a diagnostic imaging center. I'm sure they'll be happy to cut a deal. What's that going to cost somebody, and what exactly should they ask for at the imaging center?
Yeah, so I don't have an affiliation. There's a service out there called radiologyassist.com. You can go to it and order your own MRI in virtually every single state in the country, except for maybe New York is the only one that you need a physician order. But you can go to radiologyassist.com, order your own MRI, and take a look at your MRI and have it done. You pay out of pocket. Most cases it won't be paid by insurance, but I am beginning to hear, Dr. Berry, about a few insurance companies that are covering the costs of these MRI scans, even though they're very expensive. And if you're lucky to be able to do that, great. But if not, pay out of pocket, pay cash for this, cash pay, don't use your insurance. You'll get a discount. And then if you, in most cases, it's not going to be read, but you can go to my medical practice, growingbetterNotOlder.com, growingbetterNotOlder.com. We can read. We are now the first health optimizing medical practice in all 50 states in our country. So we're licensed in all 50 states. We can read these MRIs, and we can put you in a program to get rid of this visceral fat through our medical practice. And I'm very proud to build that. I'm trying to build a medical system, Ken, that rewards people getting better. And I want to disrupt healthcare. And I hope I can create this attractive model to offer a better way of practicing medicine for our physician colleagues that are stuck in a rut of just treating disease.
I totally agree. And so what's the rough price range if somebody gets their own MRI, and what exactly which kind of MRI, because there's several different kinds and different levels. What's the average price range, and what exactly should they ask for?
Yeah, so nationally, the average cost of a single MRI is $250. So not that much more than getting a DEXA scan. And in one case, I'm down in Florida, $111. That's just downright cheap. So and the scan you want to ask for is, first of all, no contrast. You don't need to have contrast to see visceral fat. So a plain, non-contrast abdominal scan, and that should capture the liver. And when you capture the liver, you capture the heart, because the liver goes up high enough that you're going to see that fat around the heart. So just one abdominal scan will allow you to see your heart fat, your muscle fat, your visceral fat in your abdomen. Don't use contrast. And if you go to my practice website, growingbetternotolder.com, they'll work with you to help you out if you can't navigate the shoals in your particular state. Our physicians can order it that we're putting together, so we can help out people that can't get in, use it in their own particular state. We're licensed in New York, and we can get it for you.
So if you guys want to join Dr. Omar and I in helping to prevent the tsunami that's coming for our country and indeed our species, if we don't wake up and we don't stop looking at fake proxy markers of health, unless we start looking at real markers like fasting insulin, levels of inflammation, visceral fat, this tsunami is going to wash us all away, and it's going to be a disaster. I mean, literally a geopolitical disaster. It's going to be one of the biggest disasters because nobody's going to be well enough to take care of the sick people. That's where we're going if this doesn't stop.
So we're medically bankrupt. We're spending more money. Chronic disease is outpacing our GDP. We are medically bankrupt. This needs to be pointed out. This is a national security threat for our military. It's a national security threat for our vital services. But it is an existential threat to the United States on an economic level. We cannot maintain the amount of disease, pay for it, because it's outpacing what our growth in our economy is. So we are doomed. We're not a going concern. And it's high time somebody talks about it other than just Secretary Kennedy.
And you and me. So everybody, cut the sugar, cut the carbs, cut the ultra processed food, cut the wheat, rice, oats, and corn, cut the beans and legumes. None of that stuff is health optimization food. That's fallback poverty, starvation food. If you're starving, yes, eat the beans and rice. But if you're trying to optimize your health and have MRI scans that don't look like those, you've got to eat your meat, beef, butter, bacon, and eggs. Add the seafood as long as it's not breaded and not fried in a vegetable seed oil. Eat all the seafood as well. Eat all the eggs. Always eat the yolk. Never throw the yolk away. And then after you've taken care of the diet and got that sorted, after you've got your sleep sorted, your lifestyle sorted, your ability to cope with stress, you can't get rid of it. We all have stress. You got to learn to cope with it. Then you start doing the high intensity stuff because you'll feel like it, and you'll be much less likely to injure yourself because you'll have more muscle and less fatty muscle, which is what you probably currently have. That's the simple, and all of my videos speak to that. All of Dr. Omar's videos speak to that. Doc, if people want to learn more about you or look into your programs, how can they find you?
So on social media, you can just find me on my handle at DRSEANOMARA on Instagram, X, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And then my website, if they're interested in working one-on-one with me, you got to give a whole day, fly to me, either in Minneapolis, Naples, Florida. I also see patients in Los Angeles, Phoenix, Washington, D.C., and New York City. But it's pretty hard to get into me. I'm a lot of demand for me, but you can see me in person at just my website, DRSEANOMARA.com. Or if you want to just work with one of my physicians, and we have other plans, you don't have to fly somewhere, just stay in your own state, because we're now licensed. We really became the fastest growing medical practice. We're in all 50 states. You just go to growingbetternotolder.com, growingbetternotolder.com, And we're the first practice dedicated for eradicating disease and improving the health of human beings.
I love it. And everybody watching this, you know the effect looking at these images had on your heart and your brain. That's going to have the same exact effect on your friends and family's hearts and minds when you share this video with them, because they may never hear this information until it's too late, unless you click the share button and say, hey, you need to watch this because I'm afraid you've got this fatty liver or fatty heart thing. You need to check into this and you need to fix your diet. Dr. O'Morrow, as always, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, Dr. Berry. Appreciate the opportunity to come and share with you and your audience.
Absolutely.